Welcome to the second series of Conversations with CJ Rose. I hope you've all been well in this time when there's great changes happening on the planet. We're dedicating this show today to our great storyteller and filmmaker extraordinaire, Menelek Shabbazz, who transcended on Sunday, the 28th of June. Menelik was known as Shabazz to his close friends and colleagues in the early days of his film career. Shabazz was very serious about immortalizing the stories of the West Indian experience in Britain. His work had strong political undertones and spoke to the socio-political situation we found ourselves in as a community soldiering here on these shores. Menelek Shabbazz captured the stories from our community's perspective, and according to a fitting tribute by Michael LaRose of New Beacon Books, Menelek Shabbazz was the modern-day Griot. As well as our panel guests, we have pre-recorded tributes from close friends and colleagues. Let's hear from Michael Rose, close friend and associate.
Greetings. My name is Michael LaRose. I am a political activist, author, and one of the directors of New Beacon Books. I'd like to read a tribute I wrote for Menelek Shabbazz on this occasion. It was with great sadness I heard of the passing of Menelek Shabbazz, activist, filmmaker, trainer, archiver of the black struggle in Britain, our modern griot. The last time I saw Menelik was when he came to New Beacon to launch a spiritual healing book with his partner Nefertiti. He graciously gave me a copy of the DVD of his then new film, Looking for Love. I was happy for his continuing quiet energy and stamina. I was grateful that he stayed the course. Many have not. I knew him simply as Shabazz in the days when there were many independent bookshops like New Beacon in London. We often saw each other at Grassroots Bookshop on Goulburn Road, Labber Grove, or Head Start Books in West Green Road in Tottenham. We had a wary respect for each other. When he formed CHEDO as a film training and video production center, we often met when CHEDO camera operatives and technicians were recording cultural and political events all over London. The Black Filmmaker magazine, BFM, grasped the opportunity of the available new technology in film to batter down the door of the closed film world by producing trained and expressive black filmmakers and technicians. Shabazz was serious about the struggle of the black community, reflected in films like Step Forward Youth, giving voice to the rebel generation of black youth mercilessly stereotyped as criminal by the British media and establishment. Then there was Breaking Point, recording the unjust use of sus by the British police, and Blood Go Run, showing the historic Black People's Day of Action demonstration in March 1981 following the New Cross massacre. He will rightly be remembered for the powerful feature-length Burning an Illusion, tackling head-on the problems and possible vision of a conscious black population in Britain. He used young and established actors to tell the story. We found it radical and devastatingly realistic with brilliant acting. It was new storytelling from the ground. We longed for more. Shabazz never gave up. Even with a shortage of production money to finish the groundbreaking The Story of Lovers Rock, Shabazz appealed to the black population for the extra money and finished the film. The community was rewarded with a fantastic documentary of this black British musical creation, which featured both artists and ravers. Brilliant. I was informed that he was making Pharaohs Unveiled, one of his last films. Menelek Shabbazz self-validated popular Black culture and through film, the story of the Black struggle in Britain. He recorded it, archived it, and trained other young people to grasp the tools and skills of filmmaking. He was uncompromising in his use of the camera to tell our stories for social justice, for identity, and to indelibly stamp our presence in British history. Thank you, Shabazz, our modern griot. You can take a well-deserved rest. Others will build on what you have done. Rest in peace, Menelek Shabbazz. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We have a panel of notable colleagues and friends who will be joining us online to just run through an anthology of Menelek's work and life. But joining me here in the studio, before I bring the panel in, I would like to welcome Winston Witter, who was Menelek's mentee and also a filmmaker himself. Welcome, Winston, to this tribute. Thank you for joining us today. So who are you and how did you come to know Menelek?
Well, yeah, my name is Winston Witter. I'm a filmmaker, been involved for the last 22 years. I got to meet Menelik for the first time at the BFM Film Festival that he put on somewhere, my memory's a little bit hazy, but somewhere between 2006 and 2008. And I remember going to one of his screenings of his film, Time and Judgment, that he showed and did a Q&A at the end, but it was a very powerful documentary. And I hadn't seen documentaries like that before, really and truly, and also wasn't aware of Menelik until that point. And I think from there I got to meet him and kept in contact. And he'd kind of had a bit of a hiatus from the film world, making films from, I think, late 90s. And it was maybe a year or two later, I think I made a film about the Four Races Club. And I showed him that film, and he was, I think, at the time back and forth in Nigeria. And then next thing is there was a Lovers Rock tribute or concert that he filmed, and at the time I was in Ghana, so I came back, and then he got in contact and asked if I can come and work on the film as a second camera operator, working with the great Ian Watts, the cameraman, and so I got involved, and so I worked on Lovers Rock with him, and then collaborated with him pretty much since then. Not on all of his films, but on quite a lot of the recent films. The last sort of 2 to 3 years, we've been working very closely together.
And so, you're a mentee. You spent a lot of time around Menelik, especially around his new work, and getting to know what was going on in his mind and where he was going with the new work. And how was that? Incredible,
really inspiring, because it was before this whole pandemic thing kicked off. I think it was in 2019, January time. We're working on a film called The Hand of Ken, about Ken McCalla, the artist. And so I worked with him on that film together physically. He was here, we were working. And then I had to finish the film while he was away. So he moved, he went back to Zimbabwe, but he was directing me from afar. And we finished the film then. So we did that film, and it was about a year until we actually screened it. But in between that time of the whole lockdown and all that situation, he started sending me channeled messages from the spirit world that Nefertiti, his wife, has recorded.
We're going to go into that a little later, because his films were moving into a more sort of spiritual direction. Very. You mentioned Ken McCalla and Time and Judgment. And we're going to bring in the panel now. So I want to introduce the panel guests to us, and then we're going to speak to individuals, speak to everyone individually. So we'd like to bring in Mr. Dennis Bovell, MBE, who is a producer and a musician. Welcome to the show. Also, good evening. Also, Mr. Victor Romero Evans, a household name, actor, producer, and songwriter. Hi, welcome. Victor.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. Also, Mr. Suleiman Garcia, who's a filmmaker.
Good evening.
Good evening, a good friend of Menelik's. Ken McCalla, visual artist, and Professor Femi Bogalasagai, who's joining us from the US, who's a professor of cultural studies, an expat, British person living in the USA, who is very familiar with what was going on around the time of the inception of Menelik's films. Let's hear from Shaka Dedi, founder of the Black Arts Gallery London, speaking to us from Ghana.
I've had a long relationship with Menelik. We were friends from around age 12. Went to the same school. In the latter years of our secondary school, we delighted in our secret life. Along with Makiba and others, we consider ourselves as urban guerrillas, working to raise consciousness of political awareness in the black community. At about 16, we got involved in the BLF, Black Liberation Front, which was initially the North London branch of the UK Black Panthers. We were teenagers and joined along with people like Ansel Wong, Tony Suarez, and many other dedicated activists struggling to carve out space, identity, voice, and better conditions for black people. We were part of the formation of Head Start Supplementary School, Grassroots Newspaper, Head Start Books and Crafts, Grassroots Bookshop. How many hours did we spend outside underground stations trying to sell newspapers to tired, disinterested, brainwashed people? A lot of time. Years later, other community initiatives would follow, such as Ilimu, Ujima Housing Association, Chedo Film and Video, the Black Art Gallery. All these and more were the fruits of these early seeds. Menelik and I worked on the production of Grassroots newspaper in various capacities at BLS Whiteman Road headquarters, burning the midnight oil with many contributions from Anum, Yapo, and Tony, and many others. Eventually, I went to art school and Menelik went to film school. We maintained close contact and continued to work on the newspaper at its new location at the Grassroots Bookshop in Ladbroke Grove. One of the things we did, we both set a target of visiting Africa by the time we were 25, and that was 1979. We managed to fulfill that ambition and traveled to Togo, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, meeting with government ministers and discussing their possible involvement in a documentary examining black youth in the West looking to Africa and Africa looking to the West. That was the idea. Our 4-week trip turned into 4 months and encompassed the coming to power of Jerry Rawlings in Ghana, uprisings in Liberia, and our arrest in Sierra Leone, plus a lot of other adventures. And these things, really deepened our friendship. When we got back to the UK, it was down to work. Menelik, fueled with inspiration and a new assessment of black lives in the UK, began writing what would become Burning an Illusion. I'm not going to document all of the films that Menelik has been involved in, but I would say I'm glad to have been involved in several of the projects he wrote, produced, and directed, and thank him for his support and encouragement on projects I was involved in, such as African Heartbeat and the Black Art Gallery. I also praise him for his dedication to struggle, for his tenacity, his creativity, and his vision, and not least for his kindness as a man and a brother. As one of his favorites, Curtis Mayfield, would say, we just keep on keeping on. And Menelek Shabbazz certainly did that, right up to his very last days. We give thanks, Ashe.
Thank you for your tribute, Shaka. Bring Ken McKellar, Winston mentioned The Hand of Ken, which is a documentary about your work. So you've known Menelik since the 80s, and I know you worked on, I think, the set of the film Time and Judgment. Could you just give us your recollection of the events around Time and Judgment, and also the work that you, the latest documentary about your work and your interaction with Menelek Shabbazz?
Okay. Yes. I know Menelik from the mid '80s, and through the Black Art Gallery in that used to be in Finsbury Park, and '87. I believe it was around '87 that the Time and Judgment movie was Menelik was planning the Time and Judgment movie, and he got a few artists together, visual artists together, as well as poets, musicians, to work on that movie, Time and Judgment. It was a kind of collage of ideas, collage of images, and it was based on. I'm guessing it was based on because it wasn't a straightforward story, a straightforward story. It was well, I believe people will need to actually watch it to really get to understand it. But it was through the time of the 80s, so from 1980 to 1987, comparing that with prophecies from biblical times, and comparing what's happening in Britain with what was happening around the world. Yeah, so I was involved in helping to produce some of the sets, for the production, and also some of the artwork as well.
Okay, so
One of the artworks that I could mention was a piece around the Berlin Conference, 1884, I think, where the Scramble for Africa type thing was happening, and I did a little sculpture thing around that. But the interesting part for me was I'm not a history person or scholarly person, so the reasonings with Menelik is what drew me into the subject. The reasonings is what I believe is the essence that I have from Menelik, you know. So you know, I valued the reasonings more than the actual the artwork that I may have produced.
So Menelik was ahead of his time to have been so indulged in our history, which I think towards the end starts to come through his work. And what, did he inspire your artwork in any way? We're going to show a clip of Hand of Ken. We have that. We're going to just show a small clip just before you answer the question.
I did a painting degree. While I was there, I was thinking, what am I going to do when I leave the college with painting pictures? The college was one aspect of me creating, but the Black Art Gallery gave me a focus on how to use art and what reason I would be doing art.
Did his knowledge of our history inspire your working in any way, your modern work?
Yes, most definitely. It was his reasonings with me, his reasonings through the movies that he was making was inspiring me. He was talking in a language that I could understand, and it was a big big motivational energy that was around me. You know, he was a real force in terms of my creativity.
Let's hear from Mia Morris, a longtime friend and supporter.
My name is Mia Morris, and I've known Menelek Shabbazz for some 45 years when I met when I was 17. I used to attend the Head Start bookshop meetings with the Black Liberation Front, and he was part of that. I remember him very well because he was very unassuming, but had quiet power. He found a way of connecting with people, and we reconnected back in the 90s when I helped him organise the Windrush Film Festival, which took place at the Ritzy Cinema in Brixton. This involved Earl Cameron and Corinne Skinner Carter. This was the precursor to the Black Filmmaker Festival, and that's what encouraged him to do that, was seeing the response that people had to seeing the old films made during that particular period. And he also did the Black Filmmaker magazine, and I helped him launch the magazine and was PR consultant for the Black Filmmaker Film Festival, which involved coordinating and recruiting volunteers and training them to look after the patrons. Menelik would be remembered for his body of work, but also the way that he walked this earth. He was very soft-spoken, but will be remembered forever for his work that he done, whether it's reconnecting people to the African soil in Zimbabwe, to the mean streets of Tottenham and Brixton. Menelek Shabbazz, long may he live, through Neff, his wife and partner for life, and his children, Nadia and Kemi, who have all got some involvement in film. Long may Menelik rise.
Thank you, Mia. We have some clips of Menelek's films that we're going to play before we bring in some other of the panel guests. And if Winston can just let us know what they are and just a little bit about them. And that will include a snippet of your Hand of Ken, which is absolutely quite amazing. Shows your work as well.
So yeah, what I've done is I've sort of put together a sort of chronological selection of all of Menelek's films, the most notable ones. So starting with Breaking Point, I'll just show you a short clip from that. And then we could then go into more conversation. Then there's Burning an Illusion, a little bit from there. And then there's Blood Run. Then there's a snippet from Time and Judgment, snippet from Capture Fire, snippet from Story of Lovers Rock, Looking for Love. And then there's a little Q&A that I recorded when I put together a film festival in 2015 called the Sounds Like London Film Festival. So there's a little excerpt from him speaking directly. Then there's a snippet from Pharaohs Unveiled. Then there's a snippet from Hand of Pen. And then there is a video which I made to support his crowdfunding campaign for the Spirit's Return film. That was his last project.
The atmosphere is really dread, you know, because it's like a town waiting for a hurricane. I used to come to carnivals before and used to see people riding around in cars, you know, going to the procession and enjoying themselves. Now all you can see is police, you know. We used to see people standing on the corner, enjoying themselves, selling drinks, listening to music. You've now got barricades.
I think it's a testimony of the degree to which racism has become a kind of accepted part of being English. That we could tolerate the defense now that since the police are a cross-section of the population is racist, therefore there will be some racist policemen. I mean, that undermines the whole basis of British policing. British policing is predicated on the view and has the degree of consensus that it does, you know, enabling policemen not to be armed, etc., not to be simply a coercive force, because whatever they think and whoever they are, they apply the law impartially.
Thank you. Suleiman Garcia, you are a longtime friend of Menelek's, and I think you've worked on a number of editing his films. What are your recollection of his work and working with him? Because he was very political. Was it just a topic, or was it truly, evidently, truly second nature for him to kind of bring to light the situations, the exploitation of the community, those stories that what nobody else would root out? That's his life's mission. What was it like working with him?
First of all, I've known of Menelik through Chedo. He influenced me to get into film. I've worked in a number of productions, not just in post-production. I was his DP on a few films. And I think his work speaks for itself. I'm also a member of other film cooperatives. And we had made a film called Injustice, which was banned in the UK. It was basically about death in police custody in the African Caribbean community. It was banned here. And Menelik, typical Menelik, as an independent filmmaker, championed the film and screened it at his festival and gave us an award. Amidst all of the threats from the government, from the police force, he stood firm and put that film forward. And from then, you know, that answers your question really, because he was always, all his films are political. Film is political, film is. And the thing is, an African Caribbean filmmaker, it's one of the hardest things you could ever do. And I'm not saying that against musicians or anybody, but it's hard.
Yes.
Because, you know, music's accepted in our community. We still do not understand how important it is to tell our stories ourselves. And Menelik did. Menelik was a champion of that. All the, you know, we had conversations, all manner of conversations. Sponsorship, funding, this, that, and the other. So just do it yourself. You know, and at the end of the day, that's what he's always been doing. And it's so unfortunate that he's passed at this untimely. Well, I say untimely. I don't have, I can't say that really, but he's passed. It's unfortunate, right in the prime of what he's doing. But as always, you know, people remember when you're gone. You know, I know it's very difficult at the time to make, for you know, to raise money for films. I worked on a few. Story of Lovers Rock, Looking for Love, camera, DP. Another film, Heat. He wanted to develop a series in the Caribbean, again, a pioneer. And we shot this pilot series in Barbados, basically about modern Caribbean and the infrastructure and the structure of people there, you know. Things have not changed since slavery because we've actually put that in a modern story, in a thriller. And inside of that, he had the spiritual element as well, you know. I edited Pharaoh's Unveiled. We were talking about this film, this present film, and he was helping me obviously with some other productions. And I wanted him, well, in a way, he was going to, you know, exec produce and distribute and give advice on that. So he was always more so, his work was always political. Film is always political. You can't get away from that. But he was also a pioneer. And I would like, you know, at this stage now, to remember him as that and to continue his work on that level with obviously the help of the family, because what we really need to do to really honor him, in my view, is to continue what we're doing, continue his work as well, continue the spirit of independent film. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to bring in the legendary Denis Bovell, MBE, before I'm just going to make a statement about remembering, but after that, I'd like to bring in Denis Bovell, because you talked about the importance of music and the difficulty of us producing our music around those times, or even before Menelik in the 60s, say. But today I noticed when I switched on my computer, there was a narrative in the press from Steve McQueen. And it was in commemoration of the 40th year of the New Cross Fire demonstration, or the demonstrations that came about from the incident that happened in the New Cross Fire. And he made a commentary, and I felt maybe there's an oversight here, and perhaps he forgot. If I can just read you an excerpt from the commentary that I found. It says, we didn't have the filmmakers because of racism. Fact, there were no Black people in film school who had the opportunity to dream of being a filmmaker. He continued, we took the opportunity. No one gave us anything, especially for me. I took it. Now, to say that there were no Black filmmakers around at the time commemorating, when you're commemorating this event, is an oversight. What do you think of that? I think there ought to be an apology. And especially at a time, I mean, a couple of weeks after the transcendence of this luminary brother that went out on his own and did his thing independently. And is it because of behavior like this? You think that's why he went off and almost underground and worked independently? Because from my observation and the small time that I knew Menelik, I realized that he was not supported at all from the mainstream.
In the media, you're going to get so much of this rubbish. I don't take it on. I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. I want to just form our networks across the globe, across the diaspora, which I've been working on with Menelik as well. You know, as I said, we're looking at our experts in the Caribbean, on the continent, make our product. That's what I'm not interested in, you know, all of this kind of stuff. I really am not. You know, it brings up an emotion for what? It's not giving up in a positive. And this is how Menelik saw it as well. Just get on with what you got to do. Show what you have to do, you know, and so let's develop our networks. We're not, what other story? What else are you going to hear from the institution? What else would you hear? You know, at the end of the day, we know better, so let's put that forward. And that's all I have to say on that matter.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. So at this point, if I could bring in Dennis Baval, what was it like in the music industry? And I know you worked on the soundtrack, or did you work on the soundtrack for Burning an Illusion? What was it like?
I think one or two bits of music that I wrote independently of that he utilized in his film. But I worked with him primarily when he was introduced to me by Castro Brown, who was ready to do a festival of sorts in Brixton Academy, and Menelek was going to film it with the intention of making a video of the whole event. And it went over 2 years, and then finally he started to do interviews, and I was the person who was able to introduce him to John Kapai. John Kapai is a man who's been in the music business for many years, but an unsung hero. In fact, he had written and produced and played all of the instruments except for the drums on a famous song sung by Brown Sugar called I'm in Love with the Dreadlocks.
Yeah.
And he was tickled that I knew the person, or I could take him to the person who that person was, the man John Kapai. John Kapai also wrote another song that Brown Sugar recorded, a song called Black Pride.
Wow.
And I think those two songs have been revisited by a member of Brown Sugar going by the name of Kofi, and produced by the Mad Professor in his Ariwa studios. And a lot of people really didn't know that the architect of those two songs in particular, I mean, he did a lot more other things, you know, but for the lovers rock genre, you had to respect those two tunes straight away. And for the Black people in England making a positive statement, you know, and that the fact that one of the singers of the band at the time was a young singer by the name of Karen Wheeler. And she
Mm-hmm.
went on to do great things with Soul to Soul. And John was kind of their kind of first musical recording person, because he was in charge of recording them when they were teenagers. And there's a little known fact. So I guided Menelek towards John, not thinking that he wanted to interview me as well. And then he said, right, I've done this interview with John. Now, I want to hear your side of what we went on. And because John and I worked for a man called Dennis Harris, who was the entrepreneur that came with the label Lovers Rock and kind of cemented the title of the genre. Even before that, sound systems were kind of encroaching on going, yeah, this is Lovers Rock. And you know, Dennis had an idea that anything that was happening on the street was worthy of, you know, bringing it out to make the world know that reggae was being made here in London, in fact, in Brockley, you know, and that it was ready to challenge for the #1 position of a new genre, Lovers Rock. And so when Menelik was making this film, Lovers Rock, and I found myself, you know, talking to him, and then, well, he knew Victor and Janet from Time, and then Carol, and then all the people that we knew that worked on Lovers Rock. And I think perhaps the unfortunate thing would have been that instead of being called the story of Lovers Rock, it should have been perhaps a story of Lovers Rock, because other people who weren't in it were deeply offended, and I don't know why they weren't in it. But I suppose it's you know, when you're making a film, sometimes this has to be part two. And recently, Menelek sent me an email and said, right, I want to talk to you, but I've lost your telephone number. And I went, ha ha ha. And I sent him my telephone number. And not only a fortnight after, to hear of his passing, you know, I was very, very moved.
Thank you. Thank you. Victor Romero Evans, you were in the story of Lovers Rock, and you were also, or are also, a Lovers Rock performer. You sing the music. We created this really powerful genre, and it seems to me that wherever we were working silently but magnificently, Menelik was there to record the story. If wherever there was contention, Menelik was there to record the story. What are your memories of working with him and around that era, which was a beautiful era for us, a little bit younger, growing up, you know, with this Lovers Rock, even impacting us today?
My memories of working with Menelik go way back to when I became a professional actor in 1989 with the Black Theatre Cooperative, and we did a play called Welcome Home Jacko.
Ah,
yeah, Welcome Home Jacko. And
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, we brought a lot of young people to the theatre, and as well as a lot of young Black people, because at that time there weren't no young Black theatre company, and there wasn't a tradition of Black people going to the theatre in the 70s, and so Charlie Hanson and Mustafa wrote the play, and Charlie brought us together to perform, to do the play Welcome Home Jacko, and Menelik came to see it, because at that time he'd written the film Burning Illusion. And after seeing me in the play, afterwards he came to me and he said to me, I've got a movie and I want you in it, and blah blah blah. And I got the part. He offered me the part from Seeing Me on Stage. So it was a when I look back on it, I'm thinking to myself, you know, you don't realize, you know, when somebody's a bit older than you, because Menelik was in his 20s. He was in his 20s when he done Burning Illusion.
Wow.
Anyway, I found him to be so, you know, he was such an interesting person in terms of his knowledge. You know, he he possessed a lot of knowledge. He was very calm, very gentle, very astute. His eye for detail. He had a great eye for detail. He also gave you room to do your thing as an actor. And if he felt something needed tweaking, he would, he'd talk to you. He'd talk to you nice. Menelik was in my opinion. Menelik was what I would call a superhero.
Yes.
As Suleiman was saying, we don't have a tradition of film having black films being done in England. Prior to Menelik, I think we only had two, which was Pressure and Black Joy. And when Menelik came with Burning Illusion, it was like a breath of fresh air to me as an actor, just coming into the business. And as I said, there not being a tradition of black film, I felt that this was going to catapult us to the, we'd be doing films every year, and because we had such a talent. We had such great acting talent at the time. We had Malcolm Frederick, we had T-Bone Wilson, we had Norman Beaton, we had Trevor Thomas, we had elder actors who were brilliant, and young up and coming actors, which I was a part of, who were full of energy and ready to take on the world. And we had a superhero in Menelik, as Suleiman said, who said to the mainstream and all that. We've got our movies, we can do our own thing. He wrote the film, and Menelik didn't compromise anything. He didn't compromise. He wanted to do this, and if he couldn't do this, then there was no couldn't about it. He'd do it, and that is what I deem to be superheroic. The fact that when everybody's against you, everybody's there's obstacles in your way, and you bash them down and get them out of the way, and you get the thing done. And getting our image out there, as Suleiman said, we have to tell our own story, man. We have to, Menelik did that. The clothes we wore, thank God he did Burning an Illusion. So that we've got a document of those times, how we were treated as black people in this country, how we dressed, how we, the things we liked, how our color, he captured that on film, so that when idiot things come out, you can look back and say, no, this is an idiot thing that this person just did. because we got a blueprint there.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
That the thing that this person, these things that these people do is an idiot thing. This is a real thing. We've got the real thing there. So thank goodness, as you said earlier, Carol, he was ahead of his time. He knew they would come with Shegriff. He knew that if you don't put down your thing, they're gonna put it down for you.
And thank you.
And people like us who live through it, we're gonna say, "What's this? This is rubbish." You know what I'm saying? So thank goodness Menelik had the foresight to put on the things, so we can look at the things and say, this is the real thing.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
And so Menelik is a modern day superhero. Don't listen to them idiot that superhero with tights and all them things. No. Superhero is man like Menelik. Man like Menelik, who was faced with obstructions galore, can't get no money to do this, can't put their house, sell their house and do these things, And when we come out, when you see a Menelik film, you feel nice afterwards. Yeah. You feel good, and there's subject matter to talk about. I mean, look at Burning Illusion. There were so many things to talk about in terms of relationships, in terms of people, what people are faced with in the workplace and so forth, what relationships are faced with within this within this system, It's
Absolutely.
documented, and it's documented in an entertaining, in ways that we can all relate.
It lightened the load. And you know, Victor, I met Menelik at the beginning of this year. He approached me to design the clothing for the last piece of work, Spirit's Return. And it would have been a logistical nightmare because he was in Zimbabwe and I'm here, we're in lockdown. And what surprised me was his budget. He had no budget. And I was surprised. But what actually struck me about him is that he was so determined. And to know that he did that film, he made it happen. And it's a testament to his drive and his will and his foresight. And maybe that happened because he was around Channel 4 in the beginning and he knew the obstacles, right? So he was very determined. He was very determined to follow the vision. That grit. Absolutely.
And as Ken says about Menelik empowered you. You felt, you wanted to learn more. You wanted to be a superhero. You know what I mean?
Yes.
When you're a monk superhero, you just get the vibe.
Yeah.
And he was so, as I said, he was so learned. He had so much to impart. He was well read. So when you spoke to him, you just sat down like a you, just sucking up the nectar. You know what I mean? So he's really and all now, I'm still inspired. I'm vexed that he didn't put me in all his movies. I was vexed. I'm fortunate I was in 3 of them.
That's a lot. So he launched your acting career, is what I'm hearing.
Say that again.
He almost launched your acting career when he casted you into that first film, is what I'm hearing.
He made me feel great. I mean, for not auditioning for a film, I felt fantastic.
Yes.
It gave me a lot of confidence in myself. You know what I mean? And that's the thing with Menelik. He's there to boost us all. You know what I mean? So that we do our own thing. Unfortunately, we don't know the runnings as a people in terms of supporting him. How could we have supported Menelik to do? That's the only thing we ain't got the culture of supporting our heroes.
Well, I think before the digital era and social media, we only relied on the sort of channels that were to broadcast and to find out what was going on in the film world. Now we've got channels like MediaNet. We've got other platforms that we can go to, buy and obtain his films. Menelik had his own website where you could obtain his films. So this broadcast will also go out in America, and I'm hoping that we are showing our American cousins that we have a culture here of filmmakers as well who are talented, that's told our stories, and to investigate and get familiar with the work. We hope to have Menelik's cousin, who will be on in the next 10 minutes, from Barbados, Watfield Batson. But prior to that, I'm going to bring in Professor Femi Bogle Asagai. We're going to get Femi to just give us an overview of what was happening in the UK in the 1980s that really reflected in Menelik's work. And then we're going to show just snippets of some of the films that you've put together. So welcome, Professor Femi.
Hello again to the audience and to the panel members. In the spirit of my brother-in-law, Super Vic, and Suleiman, I think it is important that we melanated people, African people, carbon people, Black people, and first frequency people in England and in Britain understand the void that has been left within the collective as a result of the transition of our dear brother. I called him Shabazz. Known him for many, many years since the days of the Black Theatre Cooperative. It is right the way through. I was always an academic that was there with my sister, my brother-in-law, and other actors and artists and filmmakers. And it's wonderful to hear somebody like Brother Suleiman and Winston, other filmmakers, talk about continuing in the spirit of independent filmmaking. Independent because we have to understand that Shabazz was our griot. He was our storyteller. And we understood that. We believed that. We didn't question him as a filmmaker making our story. And he did so with authenticity. That can only come when you look through the lens of your own culture, historical, and also your life experience, your reality. Now, those of us who are the Windrush generation, if you will, and those of us who were at the coalface of the social justice movement in England during the 70s and the 80s knew that when Menelik was doing something related to us as a collective, it was being done authentically. Okay, we knew we had a recorder among us. We knew we had a person who would absolutely memorialize our lived experience within England, you know, using film. And we didn't question his desire to do that because of his authenticity. So his works provide really the kind of four corners of the house in which we live in England. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, if we look from the point of view of the judicial system, economics, employment, education, and culture, we can identify a film made by Menelik that speaks to this. So that if we look at the judicial system, and I'll also say the criminal justice system, because the focus of the state has been to criminalize the Black community in England, particularly our youth, using the SUS laws. That's why Breaking Point is such an excellent, excellent movie. Because Breaking Point speaks to what that 1824 Vagrancy Act was about. I mean, it's vagrants and wandering poor. That's what the act was about. Now, people who came into Britain via the Windrush didn't come here as vagrants or poor. Came to actually work and rebuild the nation, but that law was used to attack us. So when you look at Breaking Point or Injustice, you can look at where we were sitting in that house or outside of it within the criminal justice system. Now, looking at economics and employment and relationships, Burning an Illusion speaks directly to that. The business of what happened to the Black relationship around the dignity and the honor of the Black man and finding work and what that was about, how that impacted their relationship and their families. Education, Step Forward, another one of his movies, speaks directly to what was happening to our community within England, within Britain. And of course, the whole sociocultural issue around how we were imposing our culture as Caribbean people, as African people in England, our language, our music, our swag, you know, the way that we presented ourselves in an environment that was rather bland. It was gray and dark and dingy. Okay, we introduced color and life. Why do you have to wear yellow? You know, why do you have to wear green? Why do you have to have these parties? Why do you have to be so loud? Why are you speaking what you call English that we cannot understand? Lovers Rock gives us that. You know, Catch a Fire speaks to our cultural history coming back from the Caribbean and so on. So Menelik's work is social commentary for us, right? It is political, highly political, because as said by Suleiman, film is political because you're memorializing the life of a people. And as Victor quite rightly pointed out, we have the evidence and the proof to show those who are coming now, who would want to misrepresent us in order to fit into the bag of, or the home of Eurocentricity. That is not what it's about. This is what it's about. This is who we are. We have got to keep our authentic selves together. If we look at the atmosphere that existed in Britain during the 70s and the 80s, and why it culminated in, you know, the day of the New Cross demonstration, if you will. Between 1976 and 1978, there were 22 murders of Black people, all attributed to racism in this country, or should I say in England at the time. In 1976, and I was there myself, engaging in that kind of resistance to the attack by British police on our carnival. Okay, I was there, as Anoon pointed out at the beginning of the film. You know, why are the police all here? Why the barricades? Prior to that, we were simply engaging in our carnival activities. In 1980, St. Paul's in Bristol blew up. Okay, there was an uprising there. And I'm using the term uprising and not riots because riots is a criminal act and criminal activity. Uprising comes from people who are suffering socio-political oppression. And that is what we were dealing with. You know, as some would argue, we're still dealing with today. In 1981, over 5,000 Black young people were stopped in the streets of England and searched using the sus laws. Southall blew up in 1981. Southall, of course, primarily Asians, but nonetheless, they were resisting, particularly the Sikh population. 1981, we also had Liverpool, you know, what they referred to as Topstep, that particular area of Liverpool, blowing up, right? People rose up to resist the kind of socio-economic and political pressure that they were experiencing. You know, for the first time in England, CS gas was used on the population in 1981. We had the Scarsman report, right? That report celebrated the police and blamed poor parents, poor people for that. You know, in 1981, Manchester also, the people there rose up. Our people rose up. 1981, Leicester also rose up, right? And by 1981, we had the New Cross, of course, situation, right? Where our children died, 13, 14 of them dead. To this day, nothing has been said, right? To this day, nothing has been said. So, you know, and there have been many people at the cold face. And what Menelik, or Shabazz, as I called him, and many of us called him, did was to record that, to memorialize that, and to give us now the opportunity, one, to celebrate his life, but to also reflect. Because I took it upon myself to watch several of the films and you know, just to refresh. And it was very traumatic for me because I'm living in the United States, having come into exile out of England in 1986 or thereabouts, following many of these uprisings, because it just so happened I was married to a person Maggie Thatcher was going to take out in her jail. You know, so the experiences of our people have been recorded in a way that will allow us to be able to dialogue about that kind of injustice. But I think what is important, what we should not lose sight of, is our ability to independently do for self. We are at a point in our lives, I believe, where we literally must find the resources to independently tell our own stories. We have to do that. We cannot be dependent on anybody else to do it because they're not going to do it in our voice or with our reality or with our lived experience. They will do it for the capitalist gain that comes from it and for being assuaged by the establishment. Okay, this is not what we want. We want to look at filmmakers, like who we obviously have in our midst today, who will make our stories based upon what our reality is and what our experience is. And we must be the ones to do that. As we have the discussion, you know, I'm going to talk about some of the names that were on the front lines because I'm very conscious of the fact that this is also a memorialization of a brother who I certainly loved in life and I'm loving him in death, you know, because I believe he's transitioned and his whole energy is going to allow for a movement that we don't know what that looks like yet.
Absolutely.
Okay? So as we discuss and talk, I will be mentioning many other people who were around, engaged in the kind of struggle that we were forced to engage in England and that forced many of us out of the country, unfortunately.
Thank you. Beautiful, Professor Femi. And, you know, you talk about the spirits of independent entrepreneurship, and Menelik certainly exemplified that.
Blood I go run! Blood I go run! Blood I go run!
After the racist murder by fire of 13 young black people in January 1981, there could be no going back for the black communities. The chants, the rage of this march, 2 months later, were to be a final warning. For a near bankrupt capitalist Britain, 1981 was to be a year of blood and burning. We have been forced to fight back as the British state machinery gave full support to its police to attack black people. The African youth, who continue to endure the brunt of racist police, came to the forefront of militant resistance. This resistance over the years moved from the individual and small-scale confrontations to major pitched battles involving hundreds and even thousands of youths, as seen here in the 1976 Notting Hill Carnival.
I was 22, not doing too bad. I had my own flat, a steady job, but that wasn't enough. I wanted to settle down. Somehow, though, I never seemed to meet anybody I could really feel for.
Boy, so you enjoyed the evening?
Great, it's a really nice time.
We're going to do it more often. Sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite you.
Give us a ring.
I heard the call of time. 400 years exile in Babylon. There, I kept a diary of the things I saw.
Men and people will fight you down when you see Jala.
The year had only just begun when I heard of the fire that wasted 13 lives at a birthday party in New Cross, London. It's the same fight against fascism in South Africa, where the blood of hundreds of innocents was shed.
You're supposed to be a bloody social worker, aren't you? Well, you better just phone the electric people here and tell them don't make me and them have hot water and fire and blood and brimstone today. Ow!
The police were planning Operation Swamp, a major stop-and-search operation in and around Brixton. The result, a major uprising.
To the black educators, stop being afraid to stand up on the side of truth and justice.
Things came to a head on 7th October. A man intervened verbally in a case in Morant Bay Court and was ordered to be arrested by the magistrate. The detained man was then rescued by Paul Bogle and his people. As a result, the magistrates issued warrants for the arrest of Bogle and over 20 others. They saw Bogle as the leader of the disturbance. However, attempts to arrest him failed.
We, the petitioners of St. Thomas in the East, send to inform Your Excellency that on the 7th of this month, an outrageous assault upon us was committed by the police.
Let's hear from Whitfield Batson, Menelik's cousin, coming to us from Menelik's hometown in Barbados. Thank you for your speedy acquiesce to join us, because you only found out about this today. So I want to thank Dennis Baval for reaching out to you and for you to make time to join this celebration of your beloved cousin, Menelek Shabbazz. So welcome, Whitfield Batson. Could you tell us your memories of Menelik? You're in Barbados. We envy you, but thank you for joining us.
Right. Well, let me tell you the story in Menelik. Growing up, I knew no one called Menelek Shabbazz, but I knew Trevor Brathwaite, quiet yet rebellious second cousin who grew dreadlocks, much to dislike of his family, or some of his family, I should say. Now, he was born in Barbados, as you would know, in 1954, in the parish of St. John, a place called Kendal. Now, that's where most of my father's family came from. At that time, there would have been like a mass exodus of family members from Kendal, and from the whole of Barbados and Caribbean, for that matter, settling in the United Kingdom. Now, hence the reason I was born in 1962 in the United Kingdom. Mr. Brathwaite Sr., he was one of the first to make that journey and then to send for his family, Menelik, when he was only about 5 years old. My parents, on the other hand, they sent me back to Barbados. I was born in England. They sent me to Barbados. He was born in Barbados. His family brought him over to England. I then went back to United Kingdom in 1976. As you would know, as West Indian families would do, on Sundays, you get in the car and you visit a family whether you were invited or not. So, this is the interaction at that stage when I was only 13 then, 76, that I would have had. When the funny thing about this is that I then moved back to Barbados in 1994. Now, everybody's getting on with their lives. I heard about Menelek Shabbazz. I watched many of the films of documentaries that he made. But if we can fast track now to 2012, I get a call from a business partner of mine, Errol McCollin, and he says to me, they're premiering the Story of Love is Rock at the university, the Barbados Center for Creative Imagination. He think, us living in Barbados who have experienced that time should get involved. And with no hesitation, I agreed to do that because I love Love is Rock. We had the show. It was beautiful. Everybody enjoyed themselves. It was great. People like myself who've either lived or were born in the United Kingdom who now live in Barbados had an opportunity to meet each other and share memories, etc., etc. Now, the producer, Menelek Shabbazz, was unable to be at the premiere, to premiere the Story of Love is Rock at the university here in Barbados. He actually came into the island 2 days after, a couple of days after, I should say, 1 or 2 days. At that time, I was actually planning my 50th birthday party gathering. So I extended the invitation to this Menelek Shabbazz, which he accepted. He came to the party. We had a great time again. The following day, as you do, I posted some photographs. And I got a call from one of my cousins in the United Kingdom. And he says to me, I see you're partying with your cousin. Now, I had no idea what he was talking about. And I guess he sensed that I had no idea what he was talking about. And, he said, Menelik, that's Trevor. I'm like, oh, dreadlocks, Trevor? So we bonded. We got to know that we were family and who we were from back then to now, to 2012, sorry. When he visited the island, he would invite me to where he was staying, and we would have some very, very deep conversations. For those of you who know him, would know what I'm talking about. I found him, again, the same kind of temperament as we would have remembered him when I was only like 13 years old. Very, very quiet, but still that rebellious thing in his blood. He called it rebellious, and he made a statement to that effect. Only a few months ago, I called him in Zimbabwe, and I said to him, Menelik, tell me your story, which he gave me permission to record. Not knowing what his fate would be, I find it quite ironic, but that is what happened. I know that he was on a mission to enlighten his people. He felt it important that we claim what is ours, and hence his journey to Zimbabwe to make the film that he was working on at his passing. He was very passionate about that, And he was very passionate about. I even got an invitation to Zimbabwe. His message to me: if you want wealth, you need to come to where the wealth is. And
that's right.
That was his message. One of his last messages to me in conversation over the telephone, Barbados to Zimbabwe. A very decent man. One with an eye. I actually had the opportunity when we became friends. He when he was doing a documentary here in Barbados. Well, it wasn't a documentary; it was a drama called Heat.
Yeah, Heat.
That's right. Love, sex, and murder, and that kind of thing. And he invited me to get involved. If you look at the beginning of the film, I'm the taxi driver. And he also allowed me to use, or asked to use, one of my compositions. I do write songs in the film, which I felt honored to do. It's sad that I didn't get to know him in the middle part of our lives, seeing that we're both involved in entertainment in one way or another. But the time from 2012 up until today, we remain really good friends and shared some very, very deep conversations, as I said. So for me, like everybody else, he will be sadly missed. A great, great talent. As they say, gone too soon. But I do believe that the works that he has done will stand the test of time. And I do believe that the message that he wanted to give to the world will even be brighter in his absence. And that's it in a nutshell. So in saying that, 2012 was like, it's like you felt like you won treasure because everybody's talking about this Menelek Shabbazz and whatever, and we're all getting excited, only to realize that
that you're related.
Dreadlocks Trevor from way back when.
That is an amazing story, and thank you for
Really is.
sharing it with us. Is his work now well known in Barbados, in his hometown?
It's now becoming known.
Okay.
Yes, unfortunately, the connection, unlike say Jamaica or to some extent Trinidad, Barbados had a void in the connection with Europe when it comes to acknowledging their talent. And this goes way back. You would be surprised to know the amount of people, amount of artists, from Grandmaster Flash to Ray Vaughan, the great Dennis Bovell, who were actually born in Barbados. And I mean, you can't go to Jamaica and ask someone, have you heard of Dennis Brown? And they say, no. So we must celebrate our talents. I think what it is lack of knowledge, or even the same, us, the people who are presenting our talents to the world, not making enough noise in our own country. So it's a bit of both. But I'm glad to say that we're paying more attention, I should say. As you will know, Dennis Bovell, he got an award from the Prime Minister of Barbados recently, the Pride of Barbados Award. Up until then, a lot of people did not know Dennis, and people like myself and others who have moved back to the island, who were able to share our memories and the knowledge that we have gained by understanding, because when I first moved back to England in 1976, you couldn't tell who was Jamaican and who. Everybody spoke the same. And
I was just about to say, could it be that everyone thought everyone was Jamaican? Could it have been, even for Dennis? Just Dennis, I was about to say, Dennis, why? How could that have been what happened with you, perhaps? And how can we get more notoriety in your homeland?
I think it was because I worked primarily with a lot of Jamaican artists. I mean, since the early 70s, I've been working with my band Matumbi, with Pat Kelly, Ken Booth, Johnny Clark, Roy, Nicky Thomas, people like that, uh, Derek Morgan. So I think a lot of people assumed that I was. And there were those that knew that I wasn't a Jamaican. But for those that assumed that I was, it just got out of hand to a time when I was in Jamaica. I met someone who said he remembered me from primary school. And I thought, mate, But yeah, because lots of times I've worked with so many Jamaican people, and I've been brought into the circle, as it were, that they refused to believe that I was from Barbados. In fact, the great Roy once pulled me aside and said, "Yo, tell me, what you do at Jamaica where you can't go back at Jamaica? You killed somebody." Okay, no, I'm from Barbados. You're too lying.
If I can add to what Dennis has said, back in the day, you everybody, as you said, CJ Rose, kind of spoke the same. So sometimes I only discover that I have a Barbadian brethren when I go to his house and see the map of Barbados or hear his mom speaking.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm like, hey brother, I didn't know you were Barbadian.
No, but Jamaica was the most dominant West Indian island in London, where we were. And Jamaica had so much bravado that we all tuned into that bravado as Jamaica had a swag in terms of the way they spoke. So Dennis, nobody spoke Jamaica better than Dennis. I mean, Dennis spoke Jamaican like authentic, because he was around authentic Jamaicans.
And you, Victor, and you.
Well, no, I got caught out because there was one or two words I said. Jamaicans, the Jamaicans who were very, good with their ears. They said, "You're not Jamaican." The way you say door. When I say door, I say,
hey, listen, I'm sorry to come in here.
Door. It's only later on, when people pointed it out to me that I corrected it. But Dennis was around it from some smile because his best brethren was
absolutely. Hey Vic, listen. One time I was in Barbados giving an interview on a radio station called Ready Fusion. And there's a famous presenter on that station called Alfred Pragnell. In fact, later in his life, he was knighted Sir Alfred Pragnell for services to broadcasting. And whilst in this interview, he said to me, of course, there's a Dennis Bovell who's a Jamaican. So I said, yeah, I never heard of him. Right? Then he proceeded to play an interview that I had given on the BBC World Service to Linton Kwesi Johnson, where I was speaking like, yeah, well, you mean what, Reggie? Yeah, it's that. Yeah, like that, right? And then, and I thought, oh God, that's me. And when he stopped the recording, my direct answer was to start saying, hey, well, you see, Pragnell, when man go out foreign, them learn things, say. And he was knocked out.
Yeah, man. We were all
amazing. Incidentally, Whitfield, you mentioned Errol McCollins, right?
That's right. Shades.
Is that from Shades? I went to school with all of them. 6 degrees of separation. Can you imagine that?
Yes.
I went to school with the McCollins brothers.
Right.
Small world. Wow. Small world, and we are one people.
Yeah.
We are one people.
Right,
Solomon, where are you from?
Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay.
TNT.
Sorry?
TNT.
I've never heard it called that before, but I like that. I like that.
You haven't been to Trinidad yet?
I want to go.
TNT.
I've been to St. Lucia.
Well,
I was born in Jamaica. Sorry? I was a Banayard,
Well, I'm an honorary Senegalese.
Okay. Okay, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, I just wanted to
You know, when
mention.
people ask me where I'm from, I say I'm an Earthling.
Absolutely.
From the planet.
I'm from the planet. We came with the stars.
Yeah, but they're from Earth, you know, all over Earth too.
Yes.
That's the opening. That's the opening line of Pharaoh's Unveiled.
I was just about
It
to
came
say,
from the stars.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. I know where I got that channel from.
Well
From
edited.
yes, and I think what I could see towards the time and judgment, there was this link to all of
Yes,
us
exactly.
coming through in that piece of work. You were about to say something, Winston?
Yeah, I was just going to say about the degrees of separation and growing up and going to West Green Road and going to Head Start Bookshop, which I had no idea Menelik co-founded, because my dad used to go to West Green Road to buy food to cook for the Four Races, and I used to be there with him. We used to get the drinks. So while he was doing all of that, I'd be inside the bookshop hanging out with Mr. McGarvey, who's always showing me this book, that book, you need to read this. My dad used to supply the shop with carvings from Ghana. So Menelik and my father must have obviously knew
And
each other.
who's your father? If you
My
just
dad was Glenford Twitter. So
from Four Races.
it's only recently talking to Menelik and just talking about half days, and I mentioned Head Start, and I was telling him like a third person, like as if he was, he didn't know anything, and he says, "Oh, that was a bookshop that I co-founded." I was like, "Wow." I mean, Menelik is prolific. I mean, he has been involved in
His
so
fingers
many
in many pies.
different
Yeah.
organizations and the credit. I mean, we've got to give him the credit. Here we are. So yeah, the degrees of separation. So I've obviously known him as a child. You know what I mean? And then got to know him a bit older, privileged to being able to actually collaborate and work with him. Because for me, as you were saying, Victor, it's like he is a superhero, and he's my, he is somebody that really supported me. You know what I mean? In filmmaking and giving me advice and that energy. As you said, it's just that energy. It's heavy. Yeah.
Do you remember in lockdown when we were filming? Because we've done some work together. You've worked on some of the film around my collections. We were filming in London for one of Menelik's films, and you were in my car. You've got your cameras mounted in the car, and everywhere people were just looking. And Winston's like, "Why is everyone looking at us?" I said, "Winston, we are driving around in a car loaded with cameras." And then we drove through Buckingham Palace, and we got stopped by the special forces. And what did you say to them? Because you were filming one of the scenery for one of Menelik's or Nefertiti's work.
Yeah, it's a channeled message from the Lycarians talking about COVID vaccine and the whole situation. So collaborating with Menelik on this piece, I'm getting the visuals. So he's like, "Yeah, I want you to get some shots like looking through the window of a car as if it's a spirit, come down to observe."
And I volunteered to be the driver.
And so we were driving through and just sort of seeing people with masks and COVID testing and all of this. Police pulled us over and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, we're doing some spiritual work." And they were like, "What do you do?" "Well, we're making a film talking about this current time." Like, it was all recorded. I left the camera recorded just in case the police did any funny business.
Yes, I remember.
And I sent it to Menelik. I said, "Oh, check this out. We got we got pulled over." And then he says, "Yeah, you got to start the film with that. Start the film with that sequence."
Yes, because you were very honest, and they were like, what? But I think it was when we did a funny turn on the Pall Mall, and that's what kind of maybe drew attention to us. And we had all this heavy loaded equipment in the car, driving around in lockdown. It's hard, and there's two black people with all this camera staring out. It was hilarious, but we've got it captured, as you'd say, evidence, Victor.
Carol, I think what is really important as I listen to everybody talking,
yes,
and especially listening to his cousin, I think what is really, really important to keep in mind as we remember Shabazz is really the fact that he had a consciousness about himself as a melanated person that was unapologetic. He was unapologetic about who he understood himself to be and who he understood us to be as Black people. That is so important. He was not a person willing or showed any willingness to step away from his Blackness, to step away from his heritage, to step away from his background. And surely he was in a process of growth We know that by where he found himself in his death. You know, he's back on the continent. And his own cousin can talk about him as a little boy being that conscious and that defiant, if you will, about the established order. And we understand how that order saw us even within the Caribbean. So we need to really keep that in mind and keep that at the forefront. Because I think, again, as a collective, as a people, we need to understand that fundamentally, that is what will sustain us. Our ability to engage in that reflection, to engage in that kind of introspection about who we are as Black people, melanated people, you know, first frequency people, and what that means as we begin to claim what we know to be the truth and what we know to be life-giving and what we know to be humane. You know, we're in a very, very prophetic time, and we need to be aware of that.
Thank you, Femi, and that is so profound. Beautiful. And you can see where that spirit was going with the final pieces of work that Menelik was producing, along with Nefertiti, who would get these channel messages and he'd put that into film. So we're rounding up, and I really wanted, this could go on forever, and we've got more footage to show. I just want to quickly say to Ken McKellar, you know, that you worked on one of his films, you did some of the scenery for the film, and then 20 years later, he comes back to make a film about your piece of your work. How does that feel to you? How did that feel to you?
It's not just 20 years separation, because we've been involved through the time. So his work, I can relate to it, and I feel it tells a story that is familiar with me. But as the cousin was talking about Barbados, I was there at that film festival, and we went along to Pelican, and it clicked on me that not only was it relevant to people that had experienced, say for instance, in the something like Burning Illusion. Not only was it relevant for the people here in Britain that experienced that kind of lifestyle, but Black people all over the world looked on that movie and had some connection and had some conversation with that piece, and it was it's very powerful, a very powerful international presence that I felt that Menelik had, and it took me being outside of here to kind of understand that.
Let's hear from Marva Lord, social media manager for Menelik's production company, Sun Ra Pictures.
Hi, my name is Marva. I am here to talk about my memories of Menelek Shabbazz and his significance as a filmmaker and a cultural worker. I met Menelik 23 years ago when I moved to London. I lived in North London at the time, and we had a mutual friend named Floyd Webb who lived in the United States, but Floyd used to, he knew that I had an interest in film. As a writer, reviewer, I reviewed the work. He introduced me to Menelik in case I might start working with Menelik, writing for BFM magazine at that time, which I did. And Menelik was interesting to work with in that he actually was interested in my background in music as well as my interest in technology, and he would encourage me to write about music, technology, and film. And at the time, he was also running the BFM film, Black Filmmaker mag. He was also running the Black Film festival, Black Filmmakers Film Festival in London. So I had a chance to get involved with that a little bit. And mostly I became more and more involved with the website side of things, helping to grow a presence online for the magazine and for the film festival. I think one of the things about Menelik is that he was always interested in the voice of Black people, the presence of Black people, and helping Black people have platforms through which they could tell our stories. And he was very interested in the work of young people and supporting young filmmakers to be able to get out there and tell their story and find platforms to promote their work as well. And he was he was very open-minded about ideas for how to access a wider audience, including a wider Black audience and a wider audience generally, but his core audience was always Black people. And we would have many, many conversations about growing your presence on the web and how to do that. We had different perspectives on it. But in the end, we came to an agreement where I ended up building a website for Menelik to promote his work. He was very shy about having his own image presented, but I felt that was important for young people to see that Menelik, his presence was there and would be as strong as the presence of his film work. So we built his presence on Facebook, social media generally, and with his website. And then a couple of years ago, I was able to talk him into uploading the bulk of his work up to Vimeo, onto the Vimeo platform as a way to try to reach a wider audience. So I'm hoping that through the work that Menelik did in that way, that he demonstrated to people of all ages that it's never too late to try to extend your network and your audience, and that we have the ability to do this ourselves, and also working with others. Menelik was always a positive person in his belief about our ability to do for ourselves and to also be able to work in collaboration with others, respectful collaboration for ourselves.
Thank you, Marva.
This is a story about the music and the way we were back in the 70s and 80s. We were the rebel generation.
My back is against the wall. Try to tell me, we cannot get me to follow. My desire, I'm going to stand tall. No matter how they try to keep me down, me not fall.
To me, Lovers Rock is the ingredients that's been put in by we here in the UK. This is our contribution to the recipe of reggae.
It's a music, right, that speaks to the heart, the soul, and the mind. It's a language. It's a way of life. It's a culture.
It was so important, and it still is important, that we get to see films that represent a broad range of experiences. There were so many films that I was seeing in different parts of the world where I'll go to film festivals and see these fantastic films, and I'm thinking, wow, why aren't these films in London? The combination of Black World cinema and UK talent was really my impetus. Now we're in a digital world, and so the festival now is reflecting that much more now, especially in terms of the seminars and the workshops that we're presenting this year. Hopefully the festival will provide people with insights as to how they can move forward with their ideas, with their projects, without constantly having to think about, I don't have the money, and using, blockages as to why you can't make your film.
know what? I just think black men are scared of black women.
If he does one little something, bruv, he's just done a big doo-doo. But it's not even a big doo-doo. He's not even farted yet.
I'm not sharing nothing. That's why I'm a big girl. I ain't sharing chicken, I ain't sharing wedding cake, I ain't sharing man, I ain't sharing jack.
Now, I ain't talking about one of those tide me over kind of snacks. You know, those takeaway, available 24 hours a day, but more likely to arrive at night type of snacks.
So I'm kind of like the woman in my relationship. I'll be real. I'll be real.
You can cook for me, you can lie down for me, but I'm going to get up and see as many women as I want. There's so many young women out there happy to accept that.
You hear women say, well, I can sleep with a guy and get up and move on, and it doesn't bother me. It's psychobiologically impossible.
The cultural connection to me is just an expression of who you are. It's not. So it's where, I'm expressing where I come from, my experiences, and all of that embodies culture. And so for me, whether I make films as documentaries or fiction, that it all feeds into it. So I don't really see that as a separation, it's just the life that I breathe. But it's also how we share that culture and bring other people into the culture. And so for me, it's a lifeblood of the life, of how we are and how we feel and how we become. So to me, it's a necessity, and that's why I think this festival is a great initiative, because it is about keeping that legacy and that expression alive. I want to come back to this point about broad strokes on television and how our culture is represented in broad strokes. And I think that's good, but it's not the only scenario. And I think that we need to now go beyond the broad strokes, because what I'm finding, and I found this, I guess, with my latest film, Looking for Love, it's got really not too much to do with music, but it has to do with how we engage with other people's experiences in the culture. And so I find that there's a gap, and that I think there's a gap between the kind of consumption of the culture and the gap between the understanding of those behind the culture. And we're still in that space. And so making that film kind of made me understand, like for example, it's about love, but yet the audiences that were coming in were all mainly black, even though, and it's a black experience in terms of love, but love is a universal theme, so you would think that it would embrace other cultures, other thinking. So to me, we're now in a time where we now need to move beyond the broad strokes.
We came from the stars to elevate this planet.
400 BCE, Kemet had already went through 29 so-called dynasties. 4,000 years of existence. And you start with the Greeks?
Greetings everyone. I'm here in Zimbabwe to speak about my latest project, The Spirit's Return. It's a documentary drama that tells the story of ancient Zimbabwe that has never been told. It's a story that is shrouded in mystery. It's a story that will astound us, because the civilization of ancient Zimbabwe, Great Zimbabwe, they created buildings in stone that last to this very day. And so great and magnificent were these buildings that many have tried to claim that it wasn't even Africans that created them, and have linked it to King Solomon's mines and have linked it to the Queen of Sheba.
it's a story that has yet to be told. I am making this film that uses ancestral memory, that taps into the ancestral knowledge. I'm working in partnership with Nefertiti Ife, who is, the ancestral whisperer, the one the ancestors speak to. And through the information they've given us that we've recorded, we have been able to bring their story to light.
Our spirits saw the land and surveyed the land. We were not from this land originally. We had walked across the whole of this land you call Africa. It was configured differently. But we were to build our monuments everywhere, as you know. We are but one people all over this land. This land is what keeps the world up. We are centrally positioned on the world atlas, if you have the right one. This is where our ancestors sat. They did their rituals, they did their connection with the ancestors. Thank you, ancestors, for leaving this monument for us so we can come here and remember your names.
I'm planning to add the visuals and all the other elements that will tell a story of ancient Zimbabwe, but it will tell a story of this country, Zimbabwe. It's a very special country. Not much is really understood about how special this country is. Cecil Rhodes is buried there. Why would he do that? What is it so special about those hills? And what is it so special about Zimbabwe? So the film is really to bring to light much more than just a historical presentation of an ancient great civilization. It's to bring to light the story that's ongoing here in Zimbabwe, why this place is so special, why people want to come here, why there's so much gold, minerals and so on in this land, untold. It's a story that connects us in the Caribbean, in the diaspora. It's a story that connects the whole of Africa as well. And I need you to support me to make this film. I'm doing a crowdfunding and you can donate as little or as much as you want towards this project. So thank you very much, and I look forward to being with you on this journey to make this film.
So where do we go from here? That's for the filmmaking community amongst yourselves too, and we will support to help to get that very, very important piece of work out to the world. Thank you all so much for this beautiful tribute. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your time. We didn't have much time to put this together. You know, again, we are a small operation, and we did it. So a round of applause to yourselves. Our final recorded tribute is from Susan McLean, Artistic Director of Theatre Peckham.
When I graduated from drama school over 25 years ago, Menelek Shabbazz was a huge inspiration to me. His filmmaking had an honesty and truth that felt ahead of its time. In 2019, Menelik approached me in my role as Artistic Director and CEO of Theatre Peckham with a bunch of enlightening projects that he was looking for a home for. We screened his beautiful film, Pharaohs Unveiled, and started planning a tribute event to mark 2021 being 40 years since the screening of his film, Burning an Illusion. Menelik also gave me a script of a musical play that he wrote called The Awaken One, saying that it's a From Streets to Immortality play that could go some way to support the enlightened journey of the young people at Theatre Peckham. The pandemic put a pause to all of these projects, but what rides through me, as always, is Menelik's desire to share his skill and knowledge for the generations to come, to embrace the creation of film and to talk about the fullness of their heritage. I will always remember Menelik saying, "We are the gods and goddesses living the human experience."
Thank you, Susan. Before we close out, I'd like to just go for each of you to just give your final words to the life and works of the great Menelek Shabbazz, who I believe is now amongst the ancestors in the stars. And if I may start with you, Victor, in a few seconds of your final thoughts and your lasting memories.
Well, I'd just like to echo Suleiman, what he said earlier, that Menelik has left us with great work, and it's for us to continue the trajectory that Menelik has been on ever since he started doing his works, and we just got to keep the upward trajectory. And also, as that last piece of film of Menelik has shown us, we need to support each other, and I mean seriously support each other. That a great man such as Menelik, we're still having to ask for, to complete our works. Absolutely. We need to find a way to support one another, so that we don't have to be doing these things.
Absolutely. Thank you. Suleiman Garcia?
When I heard the news, I got loads of missed calls on my phone from Menelik, and it was Neff trying to tell me I was away in the States working when he recently returned, and I'm still in shock, really. But I think as filmmakers, we support his work. We continue to uplift his work and introduce it to younger generations, because as filmmakers, it's our responsibility. I'm only saying as filmmakers, I'm not saying about musicians, we do the same, to tell our story, to keep our story, right? So that others don't have to tell it and water it down in any particular way. Let us do that. Let us link with our communities all around the globe. But with all the technology we have now, and these are the conversations myself and Menelik are having all of the time. We were talking about this. You were talking about Lovers Rock. We were in the midst of doing the part 2. He was talking about that with the footage he has from that. But he will always be remembered. I can't believe it, really. But what I have to do is really honor his name by doing the best I can with what I have to do, and to find to move with his inspiration as an independent filmmaker and to tell true stories.
Thank you.
May he rest in power.
Thank you. Ken McKellar?
Yeah. I'm not really that good with words.
We're with you.
There's a thing that Maya Angelou wrote or said. It's about not forgetting people, and you remember how they made you feel. You remember how they make you feel. And Menelik is somebody who's given power to our voice, and I think he's made our voice important.
Thank you. Professor Femi?
I think what I'd like to say is that there are many people, some who have left us to join the ancestors and some who are still here, who are well aware of Menelik Shabbaz's work, and people who have been on the cold face. And I think it's important to say their names here, It's important because those who see this recording need to understand that there is a big context within which Menelik worked. He understood us, our experience, and he literally left us engaging in that life's work. So people like Rudy Narayan, who, you know, he was the community lawyer. Roden Gordon, the Black People's Information Center down at the Grove. Saba Sakana, Canuck House. You know, Sybil Morgan out of Birmingham, Harambe House. Emma Lewis, also out of Birmingham, Harambe. Camby Belongan out of Bristol. You know, Cecil Gutsmore, who I believe Cecil's back in England, I'm not sure. Lloyd King, former counselor from Camden. You know, Bernie Grant, I don't need to tell any of you who he is. You know, John LaRose of New Beacon Books. You know, Pepper Kai, Brother Garvey. You know, Winston just called his name. Head Start Books. You know, their programming. Well aware that, well, certainly I was. I knew that Shabazz was a co-founder there. Grassroots Books out of Ladbroke Grove. You know, Beanie Brown, again, Harambe, Birmingham. Hannibal Candacore out of Brent. You know, Agri Burke, our psychiatrist who looked at the connection between racism and the mental health of Black people in England. And I'd like to mention this particular book, Dilip Hero's book, which is called Black British, White British. It tells the story of how the British banking system ripped our people off of our money once the British people, the British government discovered our partner system and our ability to care for ourselves with our own independent funds. We have a story to tell, and our storytellers and our filmmakers and those who capture our lives using the arts have much work to do. And in the spirit of Brother Menelek Shabbazz, I would ask that work gets done. All praises unto you, and I thank you very much for inviting me to this.
You are welcome. Hallelujah. Brother Dennis, Pavel?
Well, I'd just like to say, rest in power, Menelik. Because for sure, he had more than one eye for how our people should be represented and presented on film. And he had more than an eye for truth and exactitude. And that was what, you know, drew me to him, having already heard and seen his work, but to kind of be a personal brethren. And the fact that just 2 weeks before he was passing, he called me and we spoke. And in some kind of a way, I feel like, yeah, he's still speaking to me now, you know, because he was a mystical brother. And so I hear his voice in my head. Wow. And I just want to say to him, we love you, man.
Hallelujah. Thank you. And on behalf of his family, Watfield, Batson.
Yeah.
Your final word.
When I look back, I try to put the dots together from like when our families moved from Barbados to United Kingdom, and along with what he divulged to me, the type of person that he was, he's one that even from an early age questioned things, and he got into trouble. He said this to me himself for not doing what people accepted as the norm, and that is probably what gave him the strength to make such serious films. And after moving from Barbados to England and seeing certain injustices, that is certainly manifested in a lot of the work that he did. He thought it was important for us to be true to ourselves and to know ourselves and to try to claim what is ours, rightfully ours. You know, if you have something and somebody takes it away, and it was still yours originally, and that's the kind of thinking that he had. Not that he was going to take up anything and try to take it back that way. But by through his films, he educated us to some of the injustices and some of the things that were not brought to us. And I think he was searching for a kind of a greater truth to this whole thing and who we are as a people and how we can get to be, not to be accepted, because we don't want to be accepted. We need to accept ourselves first and present ourselves as human beings who have a right to the benefits of this world. And I see that in his work. And from the conversations we had, I know that that was along the line that he was taking to educate, to empower, for us to understand. Don't just accept what is given to you, question it, and rightly accept it if it is right for you. And his movement in Zimbabwe was all part of that journey in him finding that greater truth. And even though he has passed, I do believe that the work that he has done will bring that more to light.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for your patience. All of you magnificent in your own rights for coming together. Thank you, Winston. And thank you to the ancestral lineage of Menelek Shabbazz for giving us such a bright soul who has touched our lives and indeed will touch the world, has touched the world and will touch the world some more as his legacy lives on in his work. Menelek Shabbazz, truly the modern day Griot. Thank you.
Thank you.